Hey there.
Today I am going to show you a really surprisingly fun vocal synthesizer from Casio that doesn't actually require me to have this microphone at all. Today I am going to show you a really surprisingly fun vocal synthesizer from Casio.
I know what you're thinking. You hear the word Casio, you think of this. Or maybe this. Or maybe you're nostalgic in the synth world and remember this. In fact, the Casio SK1 was the very first thing I ever asked Santa Claus for when I was 7 years old. To be fair, I do think I asked Santa Claus for things when I was younger than that, but they were either impractical or didn't exist. For example, I vaguely remember asking Santa for a portable jail cell for my grandma. I don't know. I also knew that the Santa Claus guy in the mall was an actor or an imposter, and so my solution to communicate with Santa was to pray to him. All right, we're getting off track here. So first of all, I have to admit that in my opinion, I think we've all been collectively sleeping on Casio in recent years. For example, the Casio Privia PXS1000 is this 88-key, fully weighted, hammer action, ultra-realistic sounding digital piano that also operates as a MIDI controller, and it retails for $650, which is a fraction of what you can usually find a fully weighted hammer action MIDI controller for. The CT-S1 is a $200 61-key electric stage piano that sounds about as realistic as some Romplers 5 times its price. And I didn't even really look into this Casio stuff until after I had a meeting with them. And when I did meet with Casio, it was about something new. And they did something terrible to me. They sent me this CT-S1000v synthesizer that has musical, versatile, customizable vocal synthesis capability, and then they told me not to tell anybody about it for months. Can you imagine how hard it was to create a Christmas carol where robotic voices sing in whole tone about Nicolas Cage having a mental breakdown after losing his pet goose, and then not being able to share it on social media? I just had to hold that in. So the vocal synthesis, as you will soon see, is frankly amazing. It's extremely customizable and totally applicable for electronic music production, and to my knowledge, it's a first for hardware. Over the decades, I've played with a lot of the different software suites like Vocaloid, and they have a pretty steep learning curve, and I've never really been able to get them perfectly working in time with a DAW session. The S1000v here, on the other hand, takes a different route to accomplish this, and using pre-programmed phrases that you can make yourself or key switches, it is a complete outboard solution. Beyond this, it is a 61-key digital synthesizer, Rompler, and sampler that actually really shocked me by how good some of the presets sound. The pianos and electric pianos alone sound very good and they're very playable. And while you're not going to get the kind of flexibility and customization that you would get with the Yamaha Montage, you're also not going to pay anywhere close to $3,000. The board itself is pretty lightweight, but not lightweight enough for it to move while you're playing it. The keys themselves are pretty solid feeling for something in this price range, and it's almost as if they use some kind of new polymer for the keys that I haven't really felt yet. It uses MIDI through micro USB and normal USB. It has headphones out, audio in, left and right out, 2 pedal inputs. I've been using it with the 12-volt wall adapter that is shipped with. However, I am just now realizing that it can be battery powered too with 6 AAA batteries. Like most Casio keyboards, there are onboard speakers, and I realize that most people in the pro audio space don't really care about that, but they do sound good. They are stereo, and they can be disabled or enabled manually, even with the headphone jack plugged in. There's also an adapter available to connect to the keyboard via Bluetooth if you wanted to connect it to the output of your phone or something. And speaking of phones, you could also customize the vocal phrases, lyrics, sequences, and even vocal sounds using both iOS and Android. I tested both apps on both platforms, and they both worked just fine without any problems, which is kind of rare. So let's dive in. I think a lot of my viewers are going to agree that this is one of the most fun things I've played with on this channel. Come on. So this here, of course, is the Casio CT-S1000v with vocal synthesis, and I assume that most people watching this video are mostly interested in the vocal synthesis because, to my knowledge, there is no other piece of hardware that has ever existed where you can customize the vocal synthesis that is being spoken or sung. So right off the bat, when you turn on the CT-S1000v, you are going to be met with a bunch of different phrases, such as,
I wanna be with you.
I want to be with you too. There are a whole lot of phrases on this unit to choose from, so you could actually press category to kind of fast shuffle through them.
Raise your hands up.
So if I press back and vocalist, I can actually change the vocalist or the timbre of the voice that you hear. So here's choir group. This is actually the default of the unit.
Raise your hands up. Raise your hands up.
Choir whisper.
Raise your hands up.
Choir full.
Raise your hands up.
Then they have more traditional things like vocoders.
Raise your hands up. Raise your hands up.
And then it gets more weird and unique, like Anka.
Raise your hands up.
Child.
Raise your hands up.
Cute.
Raise your hands up.
That's cute. I actually really like the husky one.
Raise your hands up. Raise your hands up.
And then they just get weird, like Ghost.
Raise your hands up.
And then there's animals, which is so weird.
Raise your hands up. Raise your hands. Raise your hands up. Raise your hands up.
All right, so this lyric is every single day.
Every single day.
Now, if we press play mode and change it to note, every single syllable will be changed with every key that we press. So in this note play mode, I'm going to show you how something like chords work, and you're going to see pretty quickly that this whole lyric thing is not a gimmick at all. It's actually very well thought out. So I'm just going to play a C minor with my left hand, and then with my right hand, I'm going to play some lead notes. Now, if I choose to let these notes overlap just by a little bit with my right hand, they will actually not trigger a new syllable. Now, this is something that would be really handy if you were performing on this after you got used to the keyboard. If you didn't feel like getting used to the keyboard, or if you're not performing on it, then you can just use key control, which is a lot easier. Now, key control would come in a lot of handy if you were using an external sequencer to sequence the lyrics, because you don't even need MIDI CC. You can just hold down a chord here, and then these first keys over here can actually trigger the different syllables. So even getting deeper here with key control, I could hit the F sharp, which will enable re-triggering, and I can also hit the C sharp, which will trigger hold. And then I can just hold a chord, and it re-triggers it inside the tempo that I have assigned over here. I could increase or decrease the times per bar that each syllable is being triggered using the G sharp or A sharp key. And I can just press play here to actually hear the tempo that we're on. And if that got too boring, I could press the D sharp and randomize it. If we press layer, it actually gives us another tone to accompany the vocal synthesis.
Let's do it for me. 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 Let's do it for me.
And you could change that easily using the dial here.
Let's do it for me. Let's do it for me. Let's do it for me. Let's do it for me.
And finally, we have split, which gives us a different instrument down here on the lower keys, such as acoustic bass.
Let's do it for me. 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 Let's do it for me.
Sha-la-la-la. Let's look at the normal instruments that aren't vocal synthesis, and there are a plenty lot of them. We have everything from just pianos. Some of the pianos actually sound really, really good for a synth this size. Actually, just plugged in a sustain pedal. A lot of people watching this probably have this nostalgic memory of a Casio keyboard that had a rhythm section and chords that you would play with your left hand, and then you could play whatever instrument with your right hand over those chords. And this definitely does have that, except it's gotten a whole lot more sophisticated, and it obviously just sounds much better than it used to. I love putting a nice little suit coat on my chords, so if I'm to play an F major, I want it to be an F major 7th, or an F major 9th, or an F major 7th B5. If I'm remembering correctly, the Casio keyboard that I had as a kid had a chord accompaniment feature that could only play major or minor chords. And I would like to think that the CT-S1000v had matured melodically just as the child had matured melodically into this heap of flesh that you see before you. So I'm going to improvise and throw a few more harmonically complicated chords at it and see how it fares. What better way to start this stress test than a cheesy bossa nova beat and an F major 7th chord. F major 9. B5 on there. All right, what the heck. I think it won. I don't know. By the way, not all of these accompaniments sound cheesy. Some of them are actually quite good, and there are so many of them. So the way that these chords work is you could press a G note, or an F note, or a C note, and it'll play the major chord, or you could just play the minor by pressing those notes. So I have the lead guitar thing up here. And I'm just going to press sync start, and then I should be able to start just by pressing a key. Now on these rhythms or accompaniments, I can also press intro and choose between two different ones, and some of them are very long and articulate and quite well thought out. So press sync start again, and G minor. This is still the intro. And then I think our song comes in now. And then I could have a fill-in or a variation. And then when I'm done, I can have a nice, long, well-thought-out ending as well. There are a lot of different rhythms and accompaniments that stem all the way from trance and electronic music to jazz. There's a ton of Latin American and Caribbean music on here, which I actually really dig because that's not something that I get to improvise with every day. When I say a ton of Latin American music, I really mean a ton. It goes everywhere from South American stuff like Chilean tangos all the way to northern Mexican folk music. And there's a lot to learn there, and that's actually something that's really important. I'm going to talk about that later in the video. There's a lot of things like traditional Indian, Indian pop, Middle Eastern, and then it goes into Southeast Asian. And after we get through a couple hundred of different rhythms and accompaniments with their variations and their intros and their outros and all of that stuff, then we just have different piano arpeggios and things like that. By the way, there's also an arpeggio on the instrument itself that I could put over this. And of course, all of these are tempo controllable, and you could even tap tempo. And finally, you can just press record here and record all of this stuff. And then you could lay over that if you want to. I feel like not that many people in this YouTube pro audio space talk about accompaniment patterns and chords and things like that often. And a lot of people just see them as sort of a silly preset or something that's funny, and a lot of times they really are. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, because funny is fun, and it makes you spend more time in front of an instrument and learning how to play it and getting a better understanding of performance and melody, and that's kind of the whole point. The big Japanese brands, Yamaha, Korg, Roland, always seem to have these accompaniment patterns included in their products, but Casio is the one that has always hit it out of the ballpark. Now, I do hope that you are enjoying this video as much as I am enjoying making it. All right, let's look at how we could affect the different instruments. So remember how I said that there is a whole lot of rhythm and chord accompaniment patterns? Well, there is a whole lot of... There are 800 sounds on this thing, and they're not just like cheap waveforms or general MIDI sounds. Like, here's a drum kit. A lot of people watching this will be happy to know that they have some of the original Casio classic tones. This is the CZ lead, which I believe is from the CZ101, or one of the original Casio CZ series. So we have a modulation knob here, and then we also have cutoff. I have a sustain pedal hooked up, but if I, for some reason, didn't want a sustain pedal hooked up, I could just hit that sustain button and... Like I mentioned earlier, we have that arpeggiator. Now, just like I did with the vocal synthesis, I could press layer and then layer another sound on top of that. So let's actually layer another one of the Casio tones on there. So layer a bass too. Now keep in mind that most of these controls also carry into the vocal synthesis part, but if we click Active DSP, we get to choose between all sorts of EQs, limiters, enhancers. Ring modulator. Also, if we hit menu and go over to balance, let's say I wanted to turn the lead down and the bass up, I can do that. We could also control the volume of the lower split or the rhythm track. We have some of the expected pedal options, and of course we could change the pitch bend range to 7, for example. Or I think probably up to 24. Further into menu, you could go to knob, and you could actually change what the different knobs do. And so, for example, I'm going to have this first knob send reverb. Really interesting sounding. I'm gonna go back to instrument here. I'm gonna turn off the layer. So we just have that, turn down the reverb, enable the arpeggiator, go to menu, go to arpeggiator, and we could actually change our arpeggio patterns. And there is a very large selection of arpeggiator patterns to choose from, to the tune of 150 of them. And then finally, some of these arpeggiator patterns can actually randomize things. In regards to editing the instrument sounds, there are some things I'm leaving out. I'm obviously not going to cover every single thing in this video, but one thing I really want to show you before moving back into vocal synthesis is auto harmonization, or auto harmonizer. All right, so I'm going to play a 5/4 jazz rhythm, and then I'm going to play an F major 7th with my left hand, and it should just automatically harmonize now. So there's really not much to it. If you play the note you want to play, it'll coordinate with your left hand and harmonize with it. If you have just been patiently watching this video rather than just skipping through the timeline looking for how to make custom vocals on this keyboard, then I thank you for your patience, and the time has come to show you. So the app works on Android and iOS, and it is fully compatible with the iPad. In my case, it would be the 2020 iPad Pro 12.9 inch or whatever. So I'm just going to create a new lyric here, and I guess I'll just hit the old microphone here. Start input. This is for the video. It is snowing in Atlanta today. I seemed to start speaking before it was recording, so I'll just do this. It will signify that the CT-S1000v is connected. I could save this as vid test, and then I will transfer it to the keyboard. I will select the user slot.
This is for the video. It is snowing in Atlanta today. This is for the video. This is for the video. It is snowing in Atlanta today. This is for the video.
Easy. Now I'm not actually going to make a purposeful rhythm here, but I'm just programming some of these notes differently so you could see how it affects things in case you just wanted to make a phrase that was in sequence with whatever way you determined it should be. Let's make this an entire bar.
This is for the video. It is snowing in Atlanta today.
Naturally, the first thing I did when installing this software and turning this thing on was program this sequence.
All of my voices in the simulation. All of my voices in...
Another thing you can do is create your own sequence where you take a bunch of these lyric presets and string them together. And so I'm going to transfer that sequence over here, and let's see if that works.
All of my voices in the simulation. All of my words are in the simulation. All of this song is in the simulation. All of your nerves are in the simulation. All of my voices in the simulation.
One last thing, I'm going into menu to enable auto harmonization, and I just want to make sure that works with vocal synthesis in the same way that it works with instruments, just out of my own curiosity. And let's find out. It is also in note mode. It does. If I spend any more time playing around with this, this is going to be a feature film length gear overview, and that's probably a bit much. So back to you, Ben. So what do you think? The one thing I didn't really touch on was sampling. This does have the capability to record or load samples either as drum patches or normal keyboard patches. I did test it, it works just fine. I have dedicated samplers, so I probably won't be using it that much, but if this is your first keyboard, you'll be happy to know that that functionality is there. Another thing, on the app, I did notice that you could load your own waveforms for the vocal tones. And I didn't even get into this particular plunge because I was having so much fun with all the preset vocals, but this is something I want to check out in the future, either in my own music production or maybe a live stream. Now on to the price, $449, which I think is very fair considering how powerful the vocal synth stuff is. And then all of the other things the keyboard can do is just a cherry on top. And about those things, those funny chord arrangement, playable preset things that a lot of these keyboards have are actually a really valuable tool for both beginner and expert musicians to play around and experiment with. Right off the bat, it is a lot more fun and practical to be playing with a drum beat than it is to be playing with a metronome, and you also get to learn the nuances of swing or alternate time signatures. A beginner can learn which notes work with which chords. An expert can learn which style of music allows different notes to work with different chords. And it's just really fun and amusing, which means that you are just spending more time practicing or getting inspired or coming up with new ideas. I'm not embarrassed at all to admit that across my little collection of workstation synths, I spend a lot of time improvising over arrangements. It's one of my favorite things to do. Well, I'm gonna stop yapping your ear off. If you like this video, subscribe to my channel. If there's anything you want me to cover in the future, let me know in the comments. If you want access to an amazing Discord community, a community that has monthly songwriting challenges, unreleased audio assets, game servers, unreleased music, snakes, just kidding, there are no snakes, then my Patreon is for you, and you could join for as little as $1. Okay, bye. Ow, Jesus.